Before I dive into the story, here is the short summary with a touch of intrigue, just as you requested. Summary. You won't believe what happened during my quiet walk at the park. My friend's brother showed up beside me, almost out of nowhere, and what he shared changed the way I saw him forever. It wasn't dramatic or wild, just honest, unexpected, and strangely moving. Tell me, from which cities are you watching us today? I love knowing where everyone's tuning in from. And if you enjoy stories like this, gentle, emotional, and filled with real-life moments, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly helps more than you know. Now, let's begin. I didn't plan for anything unusual that afternoon. I'm a woman who likes her routines, especially now that I've crossed into the slower, steadier season of midlife. The park near my home had become my thinking place, a quiet corner of the world where the trees provided just enough shade, and the pond collected the afternoon sunlight like a soft golden blanket. I walked there often, mostly alone, mostly for the peace. That day, I had just rounded the bend near the old wooden bench when I heard a familiar voice call my name. I turned, surprised, and saw Daniel, my friend Marcy's younger brother, walking toward me. I hadn't seen him in months. He was a few years younger than me, but not by much, enough for him to still feel like the energetic type, yet old enough to understand the heavier things life sometimes hands us. He gave a small wave and a smile, the kind that held a hint of hesitation, as though he wasn't sure whether he was interrupting something important. I assured him he wasn't. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked. "Not at all," I said, though my voice carried a curious warmth. I hadn't expected company, but something about his presence felt easy, like I didn't have to prepare for it. We fell into step naturally, matching strides along the gravel path. The air smelled of damp leaves and distant barbecue smoke from a family gathering by the picnic area. Somewhere behind us, a dog barked happily as it chased a tennis ball. It was all so ordinary, yet somehow, with him beside me, it felt different. He asked how I'd been, and I gave the basic updates. Work had been steady, I'd been reading more, sleeping less, thinking too much. He nodded as if he understood every word, even the ones I didn't say out loud. He told me he'd moved back into town recently, helping his parents after a rough patch in the family. I could see it in his face, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of rest, but from life's demands piling up faster than you can sort them. For a while, we just walked without speaking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it felt grounding. There's something about walking beside someone that makes conversation less pressured. You're not staring at each other. You're simply moving forward together, step by step, sharing the same view. "We used to come here with Marcy, you remember?" he finally said, pointing toward the hill where the three of us once flew sloppy homemade kites. I laughed softly. I had forgotten about that. He remembered every detail: the wind, the wildly tilted kite frames, the way Marcy got hers stuck in a tree and insisted it was an artistic choice. His voice softened. I missed those days. There was a weight behind those words, a kind of quiet longing that wasn't childish nostalgia, but something deeper. I looked at him, and for a brief moment he looked back, his eyes more serious than before. He took a breath, slow and steady, as if he were gathering courage for something personal. "I came here today on purpose," he said. "I needed to tell someone something, and I didn't know who else would really understand. That caught me off guard. Me? I wasn't used to being someone's safe place, not lately, but his tone was gentle and honest, and it made me feel unexpectedly important. So I didn't rush him. I didn't ask questions. I just let him speak when he was ready." The wind swept across the pond, carrying the sound of rustling reeds and distant laughter. We walked a few more steps before he finally said, "I've been carrying something for a long time. Something I should have shared earlier, but never found the right moment." I felt a small, steady shift inside me, a sense that whatever he was about to say wasn't simple, and that my quiet afternoon walk had turned into something more meaningful than I'd anticipated. He looked ahead, his gaze fixed on the path winding toward the tall oak trees. "I think it's time I finally told the truth." And in that moment, surrounded by sunlight, wind, and the soft rhythm of our footsteps, I felt the world pause ever so slightly, as though waiting right alongside me for what he would say next. For a moment after Daniel said he needed to tell the truth, we both walked in silence, listening to the park settle around us. A few fallen leaves drifted across the path like slow-moving dancers, brushing against our shoes. The air felt different, charged, but gentle, like the seconds before a soft rain. I didn't push him. I've learned that people open up in their own time, and sometimes your quiet patience is the greatest invitation you can offer. We reached a small wooden footbridge, the one that crossed over the narrow stream running from the pond. He stopped there and leaned on the railing, looking down at the water as though searching for the right words. "I've been trying to figure out what to do next in my life," he said, "and I guess I've felt stuck for a while now." His voice wasn't shaky, but it carried the weight of someone who'd been holding this inside far too long. I stepped beside him, close enough to show I was listening, far enough not to overwhelm him. The stream below us moved calmly, glinting with tiny reflections of the sky. "You know how everyone assumes you've got things figured out just because you look like you're doing fine," he continued. I guess I played along with that. But things haven't felt steady for a long time. He told me about the past year, how work had changed, how he'd moved back to help his parents, how he kept pretending the uncertainty didn't bother him. He said he'd been carrying this quiet worry about not knowing where he fit anymore. I listened carefully, letting his words settle in the space between us. There was something deeply human about hearing someone admit they were uncertain, especially someone who seemed outwardly composed. It made him feel more real, more reachable. "You're not the only one who feels that way," I finally said. "People just don't talk about it because they think it makes them look weak. It doesn't." He gave a small, grateful nod, the kind that says, more than anything, "Thank you for understanding without judgment." We continued walking across the bridge and onto the path that wove between tall oaks. The shadows stretched long and steady, creating a peaceful tunnel of light and shade. A bird hopped along the path ahead of us, pecking at the ground, completely uninterested in our emotional scene. Daniel glanced at me again, his expression calmer than before. "I didn't come here expecting to tell you all that," he admitted. "But when I saw you, I don't know, it felt like the right time. You've always had this way of listening that makes things feel less heavy." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but I felt a warmth wash through me. Not the dramatic kind, just a quiet appreciation. It had been a long time since someone had valued my presence in that way. As we walked further, he told me more, how he'd struggled with the feeling that life had slipped into a rhythm he hadn't chosen, how he felt torn between responsibility and desire for something more meaningful. It wasn't a confession of mistakes or regrets. It was simply a man admitting he wanted to feel grounded again. I found myself opening up too, just a little. I told him how life had become quieter for me, and how sometimes the quiet felt peaceful, but other times it felt a bit lonely. I shared how I'd tried new hobbies, met new people, read new books, yet still felt like something intangible was missing. He listened as attentively as I had earlier, nodding thoughtfully, never interrupting, never rushing my words. It struck me how unusual and comforting it felt to be heard so completely. We reached a small hill overlooking the pond, a place where the sunset always rested gently on the water. The light had shifted to an amber glow, casting everything in a soft warmth. We stood there for a moment, both of us looking out at the quiet scene. "I didn't expect today to feel like this," Daniel said softly. "It feels steady. That's the word, steady." I understood. There are days when a simple walk turns into something meaningful, A shared moment, a mutual truth, a feeling of being less alone in the world. As we began walking again, slower this time, he turned to me with a quiet sincerity. "There's something else I want to tell you," he said. "I wasn't sure whether I should say it, but after everything we talked about, I think you deserve to hear it." The path stretched ahead of us, glowing with the warm light of early evening, and I felt that same gentle shift inside me, the sense that another layer of the day was about to unfold. When Daniel said there was something else he wanted to tell me, we slowed our steps without even planning to. The park had quieted around us. Children who had been running earlier were now packing up toys and snacks with their families, and the shouts and laughter had faded into soft echoes. The sky was beginning to turn from gold to a muted rose, with streaks of pale lavender stretching upward. We reached a long row of benches near the pond, and he motioned gently toward one of them. I sat, smoothing my hands along my knees, trying not to show the small flutter of nerves I felt. He sat beside me but kept a respectful distance, his posture open but thoughtful. "I didn't expect to say any of this today," he began, his voice quiet but steady, "but I think I need to." I waited. One thing I've learned in life is that you can't brush someone when they're trying to speak their truth. If you try, the truth hides again. He looked out at the pond before speaking. The surface reflected the soft evening colors, disturbed only by a few gentle ripples. "You remember when Marcy and I used to visit your place when we were younger?" he asked. "Back then, I'd always thought you carried this calm about you. Even when life got chaotic, you had a way of making the space around you feel safe." I was surprised he remembered anything from that long ago with such detail. "I didn't know you saw me that way," I said. He gave a light nod. "It always stayed with me, even after we all drifted into our own routines." He paused. "And when I moved back to town a few months ago, I kept hoping I'd run into you. Not because I needed something, but because I felt like you'd understand the place I was in." His words were gentle, thoughtful, almost hesitant, as if he feared they might come across differently than he intended. I tried to take it in without reacting too quickly. Sometimes kindness feels so unexpected that you're not sure how to absorb it. He continued, "I've been walking in this park almost every day since I returned, and today when I saw you, it felt like someone had opened a door I didn't know I needed." A soft breeze brushed past us, carrying the earthy scent of wet soil and leaves. A pair of ducks waddled along the bank, tipping their beaks into the water, adding a comforting sense of normalcy to the moment. He took a breath. "The truth is, I felt disconnected for a long time. From people, from myself, from what I want. And when we talked earlier, it was the first time in a while that I felt steady again. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that sometimes the right person shows up at the right moment." I felt my chest tighten, not in a painful way, but in that quiet, emotional way that comes when someone speaks with rare sincerity. I placed my hands together on my lap and said, "You're not alone in feeling that way. Life can sneak up on us. Years pass, and we look around and realize we're not where we expected to be." He looked at me then, really looked, and his expression softened further. "I'm glad it was you today." Those words, so simple but delivered with a steady warmth, reached me in a way I didn't expect. I wasn't used to being valued so plainly, so openly. We sat for a moment, letting the fading light settle around us. A family passed by with a stroller, the baby inside smiling at us as though unaware of the weight of adult conversations. The scene grounded me, made everything feel real and peaceful. Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "There's something else I need to say," he added, "and I want to make sure I say it the right way." His tone changed, not heavier, but more deliberate. "I've always respected you. I always admired the way you carry yourself. And today, hearing you talk, seeing you again, it reminded me that connections don't disappear just because time has passed." He shook his head lightly, almost in disbelief. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I felt more understood in this walk than I have in a long time. I felt the same, though saying it aloud seemed too vulnerable in that moment. Instead, I said, sometimes the right conversation shows you parts of yourself you thought you'd lost. He looked grateful for that response, like it gave him permission to feel whatever he was feeling without judgment. A moment passed before he said, I want to walk a little longer if that's okay. I'm not ready for this to end yet. We stood together, our steps slow and unhurried as we moved down the path. The sky deepened into a soft mix of plum and fading gold, and the park lights flickered on one by one. The world didn't feel rushed anymore. It felt open. As we walked, the earlier tensions softened into something warm and steady. Two people finding unexpected connection in the simplest of moments. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic in a reckless way. It was human, grounded, gentle. And as we reached the curve near the park entrance, I sensed there was still more to unfold. The last stretch of the path curved toward the front gate of the park, where the lamps gave off their warm evening glow. The air had settled into that calm, late-day stillness that feels almost like a pause between one part of life and the next. Daniel and I slowed without planning to, as if neither of us wanted the conversation, or the feeling, to end too quickly. We reached the edge of the small rose garden near the exit, where the trimmed bushes formed a neat semicircle around a stone walkway. I stopped there, partly because the flowers were beautiful in the fading light, and partly because I sensed that whatever Daniel still wanted to say would need a quiet place. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets, shoulders no longer tense. For the first time since we'd run into each other that afternoon, his expression looked peaceful, like someone who had finally let go of something heavy. I've been thinking the whole time we've walked, he said softly, and I realized something important. I turned to him, giving him my full attention. He took a breath, not nervous, but thoughtful. I've been moving through life without really stopping to reflect. Always doing, helping, fixing, but not really checking in with myself. Today made me realize I've been missing real conversations. Honest ones. Ones that remind me of who I used to be. His voice held no dramatic flourish, just sincerity, the kind that sinks in slowly. And talking with you, he added, brought something back. Something steady, something clear. His words warmed me in a quiet way. Not flattery, not sentiment, just truth. The kind that comes from a place of trust. I nodded gently. I understand more than you might think. Sometimes we get so used to handling things alone that we forget how grounding it can feel to simply sit with someone who listens. He looked at me, his gaze warm but respectful. You've always been like that. You make things feel calmer, even when nothing is simple. I felt a small smile form, one I didn't have to force. And you've always had a way of surprising people, I said. You speak honestly, even when it's difficult. That's rarer than you know. He laughed softly, not a loud laugh, but the kind that slips out when something hits close to home. I guess today reminded me that connections don't have to fade just because time passes. We walked a few more steps, moving slowly along the garden's edge, the gravel crunching lightly under our feet. A couple passed by, holding warm drinks from the nearby kiosk, their quiet chatter blending with the faint rustle of the rose bushes. What happens next for you? I asked gently. You mentioned feeling unsure about your direction. He paused before answering. I think I need to start fresh, with myself, take things one step at a time. Stop pretending everything is fine when it isn't. And maybe, he added, glancing at me, let myself reconnect with people who bring out the better parts of me. There was no hidden meaning in those words, just a simple acknowledgement of the value of human connection, something many of us forget until we're reminded of it. We reached the park gate, where the soft hum of evening traffic greeted us from the nearby road. The world beyond the park looked busier, brighter, more hurried, almost startling after the calm of the walk. Daniel stopped at the gate and turned toward me. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. "For listening. For being here. For today." "You don't need to thank me," I replied. "Sometimes people cross paths at just the right moment. Maybe today was one of those moments." He gave a gentle, sincere smile. "I hope we can talk again. Maybe take another walk sometime." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. For a moment, we stood there in a quiet that felt complete, not awkward, not unfinished, but full of understanding. The kind that comes when two people share something honest without expecting anything more than mutual respect. He took a step backward, lifting his hand in a small wave. "Good night, and take care." "You too," I replied. "Take things at your own pace." I watched him walk down the sidewalk, his figure becoming smaller as he moved toward the glow of the streetlights. Then I turned in the opposite direction, my own steps steady, unhurried. The evening felt different, not because something grand had happened, but because something gentle had. A sense of connection. A reminder that even unexpected moments can shape the way we see ourselves and others. As I walked home, the quiet wrapped around me like a soft blanket. I carried with me the feeling of the day, the honesty, the shared truths, the peacefulness of being understood. Some moments stay with you not because they are extraordinary, but because they help you remember who you are. And that simple walk in the park did exactly that.